But thank you everyone for joining the Darien Library this morning. We are so lucky to have Molly Gilbert here with her new book, Sheet Pan Sweets, and her previous book, which she won't be speaking about, but you can ask questions about, One Pan and Done. I'd like to thank the friends of the library who endow these programs so that we can have them all the time, and every week we have so many nice programs on. Also, stop by Barrett Bookstore for copies of this book if you'd like, and we also have a few on hand at the library. Let me tell you a little bit about Molly. A decade ago, Molly Gilbert's hit debut cookbook, Sheet Pan Suppers, birthed one of the biggest food trends in getting dinner on the table quickly, efficiently, and deliciously. Now with Sheet Pan Sweets, Molly has brought that same sense of effortless accomplishment to the dessert table. Molly is joining us from Seattle this morning, and you can see it's still dark out there. She is the founder of the food blog Dunk and Crumble, and is a graduate of the Fresh Culinary Institute, now known as the Institute of Culinary Education. She has had roles as a cooking instructor, a private chef, and a recipe tester in the kitchen of Savour. She lives with her husband and 3 adorable children who are up and about, so you might see them. And we're so happy she's going to bring us one of her great new recipes, and questions will be answered at the end of the program. So thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in a little bit. Here's Molly.
All right. Hi, everybody. I can't actually see anybody, so hopefully you're all there and you can all see me just fine. Today we are going to be making a recipe for my new cookbook, Sheet Pan Sweets, and it is called an apple pandowdy. So a pandowdy, it's sort of like a pie adjacent treat, and normally it's baked in like a pie dish, and you know, it's a tumble of apples. There's usually a crust on top. The crust gets pressed into the apples midway through baking, which is sort of how it gets its dowdy appearance, although I actually think it's very pretty. So let's get started. Okay, obviously we're going to be working with a sheet pan today because all of the recipes in my book do. And you can butter it. I like the flavor of butter, but for the sake of saving a little time today, I'm just going to spray it with some baking spray. And then I have this giant bowl of apples here, and this is from about 8 apples, I would say. I like to use a mix between Granny Smith and Golden Delicious. I find that the Granny Smith has a really nice tart flavor and a nice firm texture that doesn't kind of slump too much in the oven, and the Golden Delicious is a little bit softer, a little bit sweeter, but the combination of the two just makes for a really nice flavor in the apple pandowdy. So I will just peel and slice my last apple to show you guys how I do that. I like to chop off the top and the bottom, which gives me a good canvas for making sure that all the peel can come off here. And I love these really cheap little Y peelers. I find them to be the easiest type of peeler to work with. Okay, so once I've got the skin off, I'm going to go ahead and core it. I just cut it into quarters, and that way I can lay a slice on its side and just kind of at an angle slice out the core from each piece. And I should have mentioned I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because I'm using puff pastry as the crust on this apple pandowdy, and that likes to be cooked at a really high temperature. And bonus, because we're working on a sheet pan, it'll cook quite quickly, this pandowdy. So I'm just slicing into about 1/4 inch wedges here. I'll get them in my bowl. And you could really use any kind of apple that you have on hand. You don't have to be limited to Granny Smith and Golden Delicious. Those are just the 2 that I prefer. But if you have like a pie recipe that you love that uses different kinds of apples, that would be just fine. All right, so I have this giant mound of apples here. And to the apples, I am going to add the zest of 1 lemon. So I love to use these microplane tools, not just for citrus. I use them for citrus all the time when I need a little, obviously lemon zest, maybe orange or lime, but I love to use them also for grating fresh nutmeg in my baking recipes, for Parmesan cheese over pasta. You could even use this to make like tiny little chocolate shavings if you wanted to do that. I just find it a really useful tool to have around. All right, so I've got most of this zest in here. Should we get it all out? And then just gonna slice it in half because I want the juice as well. And this will keep the apples nice and fresh. And it'll prevent them from browning, actually, if they need to sit around for a little bit. Having the acid of the lemon juice will prevent the apples from turning brown and sad. So we get that fresh lemon juice in there. Okay. Sort of try to catch all the seeds. And then we just dump a whole bunch of other stuff in with these apples. So we've got the lemon juice, the lemon zest. I'm gonna add about a tablespoon of pure vanilla. You could certainly measure, but I like to just do it by eye. And I'm going to add my fall spices. So this will give it that nice kind of crisp fall apple pie flavor. We have some cinnamon, some ground ginger, a little bit of nutmeg, and then I've got some kosher salt in there as well. And I really like to use kosher salt, specifically the Diamond Crystal brand, if you can find it. I find that that brand of salt is the least salty kind of salt. It really does matter kind of which kind of salt you use. All salt has different like shapes of crystals and different sizes, and it just tastes saltier or less salty depending on the kind you're using. So I use the Diamond Crystal brand. So you'll notice a lot of my recipes call for like a teaspoon of kosher salt. That's going to taste way less salty than a teaspoon of like a Morton's or a different kind of kosher salt. So if you're not using the Diamond Crystal brand, you may want to use just a touch less salt. Can't forget about our sugar. I'm also going to add in a half a cup of brown sugar. Make sure it's good and packed for sweetness. And then a third cup of all-purpose flour. And if you wanted to use something like cornstarch, you could do that as well. It's just to thicken the mixture and give the juices a little bit of body as it cooks in the oven. I probably should have used a slightly bigger bowl from this, and for this I'm going to try and do this without making too much of a mess here in my kitchen. Although what's baking for if not to make a little bit of a mess. Okay, so this looks good. And then I'm going to add my secret ingredient, as it were. I like to put in a half a cup of creme fraiche. And what this is just a French style cultured cream. I get mine at Whole Foods. Most regular grocery stores should have it. But if you can't find it or you don't want to use it, you could substitute something like sour cream would work just fine. And what I like about using this in the apple filling is that it gives the apples some good body as it bakes, and it also sort of like caramelizes. It almost creates this like caramel sauce in with the apples. I just think that the flavor and the texture is kind of extra elevated when I add that creme fraiche. So here I go, just folding it in, again, trying not to make a huge mess over here. Don't be like me, use a bigger bowl if you have one. But you can see it's starting to come together here. And then once these are all fully coated, I'm gonna spread them on the sheet pan, and that's it for our apple filling. And then I'm working with store-bought puff pastry for the crust. And the really nice thing about this is that it doesn't require any rolling out, no mixing of the dough. It's really sort of like a cheater's version of a pie or a pandowdy. But nobody has to know that it only took a couple minutes to come together. And one of the things I really like about baking this on a sheet pan and about sheet pan baking in general is just that you can bake for so many people on a sheet pan. You know, you could make something like this in a pie dish or a casserole, and that would be great and fine and lovely. But baking on a sheet pan really just gives you this great volume of treats. So whether it's like a holiday party that you're prepping for, or something for the school bake sale, or you just, you know, want to bake and share with all your neighbors, baking on a sheet pan is going to really help you get a lot of bang for your buck. Okay, so let's get all these on the sheet pan. I don't want to leave out any of that really good juice in there. Make sure that makes it in there too. All right. Okay, so we have this big pile. I'm just going to make sure that it's sort of all spread out to each corner. But it doesn't have to be fancy or fussy. Which is another thing I like about this recipe, is that it's quite casual, very homey, a little bit rustic looking, but somehow still elegant at the same time. Okay, let's save that in case I need it later. So I have my sheet tray of apples, apple filling, and now I'm just gonna get the crust ready. So this is my store-bought puff pastry. There's many good brands out there. I like the Pepperidge Farm or the Dufour brand. You just want to make sure that it has real butter in the ingredient list. And I have let this thaw in the refrigerator overnight, so it's nice and pliable and ready to work with. And I'm going to use, this one comes with 2 sheets in the box. I'm going to use both sheets. So get rid of some of this trash. And then before I cut it, I'm just going to cut this giant square puff pastry into slightly smaller squares. But before I do, I'm just going to kind of gently stretch it out. You could roll it if you wanted to, but I find if you just kind of tug at the seams here, tug at the edges, get a slightly larger rectangle, and you'll be able to cover more of your pan with apples. So just stretch it slightly. Okay, and then I'm going to take a sharp knife here and just slice this into 9 big squares. You could do smaller squares if that's the look you wanted to go for. I like the look of kind of big chunky squares on top of this pandowdy. But it is quite an adaptable recipe. So if you want different shape, you could use a cookie cutter and cut out fun shapes if you wanted to do that. But I have squares like this. So all I'm going to do is just kind of gently arrange them over the apples here. And I'm going to overlap them just a little bit. I want a few apples peeking out, but mostly good and covered. So almost done here. And I sort of have them going different directions, different angles. I think it looks really pretty that way. All right, so you can see here the whole pan is covered, just like this. It's getting pretty heavy. And then to prep it for the oven, all I'm gonna do, I have a little egg wash here. It's just one egg that I've beaten up with about a teaspoon of water to loosen it a little bit. I'm gonna take my pastry brush, just gently brush the tops of the puff pastry. And this will give the crust a nice shine. And it will also help, I'm going to sprinkle the top with some coarse turbinado sugar, and this will help the sugar stick to the top of the crust. So you just want kind of a light coating here. I'm not gonna really saturate these pieces, but I want them all to get a good even coating of egg wash. So like I said, I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because the puff pastry likes a nice high temperature. And this will cook, the recipe in the book says cook it for 30 minutes and then take a spatula and kind of press down on the crust, which will have puffed up a little bit, but you want to push it down into some of those nice apple juices and then let it continue cooking for another 30 minutes. I have found that this oven that I have, we recently moved, my new oven cooks things a lot quicker. So this will probably only need to go in the oven for maybe 15 or 20 minutes before I'm going to show you how to push it down. But again, this is my turbinado sugar. It's just this coarse sugar. I'm sprinkling it very liberally on top of all of the puff pastry and the apples. And what I like about turbinado, aside from the nice light brown color, which I think is just kind of nice for the season and looks pretty, it doesn't melt in the oven. It'll keep its nice coarse texture and crunch. So it just adds another layer of texture and flavor here. Okay, so that's it. It's done. I'm going to throw it in the oven. And there we go. Now all that's left to do is kind of tidy up the kitchen, maybe make sure that I have some vanilla ice cream on hand for serving. And that is pretty much it. I will show you how to kind of press down on the crust and let it kind of sink into the filling when that is ready. But in the meantime, now would be a really good time to take any questions, chat about baking. So
I have a few questions that came in. Let's see, someone wanted to know, you have so many rolled recipes in your cookbook, Black Forest Swiss roll, she refers to. How hard is it to roll? And how hard is it to make a bouche de Noël?
That's a really good question. I know that rolled cakes, even for me, before I had made one, they're very intimidating. It's something about, I think because you have to work with hot cake. You know, you have to take the cake out of the oven when it's still warm and unmold it onto a surface. And that can be really scary if you've never done it before. But it's not actually that hard. And I prepped you in the book. I hope I've given everybody all the tools they need to do it with confidence, do it successfully. One thing that I find really helpful to make rolled cakes is to have a good set of oven mitts or oven gloves or something that's going to protect your hands so you don't worry about burning yourself as you're kind of unmolding your cake. But it's really not that difficult when you get down to it. And once you've done it, you know, once, I feel like, you know, it's something that you realize, oh, you know, this actually isn't that hard. But it's one of the things I like about it is that it takes a little bit of kind of confidence and effort to do the unmolding and the rolling, but it's not difficult, but it looks difficult you know, the final product looks like something that you've spent hours on, or something that has like uses some crazy technique or something, but it's not. So I recommend trying it, especially the bûche de Noël. That's a good one to go with. The rolled cakes usually rely on a lot of whipped eggs to get that spongy, bouncy texture. So people think that they can be very, very delicate, and they can. But the ones in my book, instead of having you separate egg whites from egg yolks and then mixing them and making sure everything is like really, you know, carefully composed, the ones in my book, I just have you whip up whole eggs. So you don't have to worry about separating the eggs and then folding everything in. I've tried to make them kind of as pared down, as simple and easy as possible. I do really like the bûche de Noël recipe in my book because the filling and frosting only has 2 ingredients. It's just Nutella and mascarpone cheese that get whipped together to make this really creamy, luscious, chocolatey frosting. It's great for the holidays. And I do think, I think you can do it. It's intimidating at first if you've never done one before, like I said, but it pays off and it's worth it to me.
Someone also just said, I think I heard that puff pastry needs to be cold, and it didn't seem like yours was.
It was cold. It was cold from the refrigerator. So it's sold frozen, obviously, and then I just thawed mine in the refrigerator overnight, but it was still cold. And if you notice, I'm working on this marble slab right here, which is extra nice for keeping things like, you know, thawed puff pastry cool. It doesn't have to be like freezing cold. It just needs to be cool to the touch.
Someone asked, stick or non-stick pans?
Good question. I have both, and it kind of depends on the application that I'm using it for. When I am making like a dinner, usually like with meat and vegetables, or you know, something like that, I generally will go the non-stick route. I don't really know why. It's just kind of, I've had these non-stick sheet pans for years, and they're just sort of my go-tos. But now that I'm doing a lot of baking on a sheet pan, I have invested in a few non-stick pans, and I do find them nice for cakes and, you know, baked goods. I'm using a non-stick right now, but you definitely don't need them. If all you have is just a regular like aluminum or stainless steel sheet pan, just spraying it with some spray or coating it with butter can be really, really useful and effective, and you don't need that non-stick coating.
There's a question about, can you prepare many of these recipes ahead of time?
A lot of them you can, especially like, and a lot of them you probably should, like some of the sheet cakes or layered cakes, you may want a little time to firm up in the refrigerator before you serve them. There is a section of bar cookies, and most of those you can prepare ahead of time as well. Where it gets slightly dicier is, you know, something like this, you could prepare like a day ahead of time and then just refresh it in the oven again before you serve it. But I made notes in the book where things will keep for a couple of days and what wants to be served sort of right away or that day. So there's a good mix in there of recipes that you can bake that day to serve, or ones that you can make ahead of time.
Another question came in, was the French Institute fun, hard, or intimidating?
I would say it was all of the above. Yeah, I had only been doing cooking just in my home kitchen before I enrolled, obviously. I kind of took a leap to go there. I was working a corporate job, you know, one where I had to wear a suit every day, and really not liking it. And I would come home at the end of the day and just like spend time in the kitchen experimenting with cooking or baking. And that's when I started my food blog, Dunk and Crumble. And so after 2 or 3 years of doing that, I decided, you know what, like maybe I should try and make this my career. So I enrolled in the French Culinary Institute And it was super, super intimidating and overwhelming at first. It's just, you have these, very serious, very intense, a lot of French chefs as your instructors, not just French, some from all over, but, chefs who really know what they're doing and who take cooking very seriously. And I love to cook, but I never take it all that seriously because I feel like, at the end of the day, it's just dinner or it's just dessert. And if you mess up, that's okay. But it was also really, really fun. I made a lot of good friends, and obviously I learned so much there.
Let's see. Someone says, what's your go-to sheet pan recipe?
Good question. I have so many. I feel like for dinner, for like a meal, savory meal, my go-to sheet pan recipe when I don't really feel like cooking is I have a recipe for roasted sausage with onions and peppers, and I'll often toss a bunch of different kind of vegetables on there. And that's just so easy. It's really comforting, and I'll either serve that just as it is in a bowl, or I can serve it over pasta or rice. I also really like making the chicken and broccoli with peanut sauce. I just love that peanut sauce, and I could eat it on pretty much anything. But that is one of my go-tos. And then for baking, I have a lot of cookie recipes that I tend to go to a lot. I think something about just eating a cookie is really nostalgic for me. So I love my kitchen sink cookies, which I make a lot. And also the ginger molasses sparkle cookies from this cookbook is one of my go-tos, especially around the holiday season. I feel like my neighbors kind of ask every year, they're like, where are those ginger molasses cookies? Are they coming out this year? And so it's sort of a must make every holiday season.
Good neighbors.
Yeah.
Let's see. Someone asked, do you have a favorite cooking supply store?
Oh, I don't know that I have a favorite. I really like, the big ones like the Williams Sonoma and Sur La Table. I find when I was living in New York, I really liked the big restaurant supply store, which I can't remember the name of right now. But if you can find a restaurant supply store, you can get a lot of really good kitchen basics for quite cheap. But for kind of fancier high-end things, I do like a Williams Sonoma or a Sur La Table. Sur La Table is based here in Seattle, actually. So that's one of my go-tos here.
Someone said, is there a future cookbook in the works?
Not yet. I hope so one day. We'll see. I've been experimenting. It's sort of ironic because I've just written this giant sweets, all the gluten, all the dairy, everything baking book, which I love. But since having kids, especially since having my second and third kids, I found that my body is doing different things when I eat different ingredients, and it's not loving the gluten so much. It's not even loving the sugar so much. So I've been trying to experiment with some sort of gluten-free, possibly dairy-free, maybe lower sugar recipes. And who knows, maybe that might one day turn into something, but I don't have anything in the works right now.
Someone asked, what tips can you share with us that we probably haven't heard?
Ooh, great question. What tips can I share with you that you probably haven't heard? One of the tips that I find helpful for this baking book in particular, is baking on a sheet pan, is I like to buy the parchment paper in the pre-cut rectangles. I just find it saves me so much time and energy instead of trying to fit it or cut it perfectly. And the rectangles that they sell fit perfectly on a sheet pan. So if you're planning to do a big cookie bake this holiday season to give to all your neighbors and gifts and stuff, just get yourself a bunch of those pre-cut rectangular sheets, and I think your future self will thank you for that. What other good tips? I mean, I feel like if you're here, you probably love baking, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of tips, but Another one is to get yourself an oven thermometer and make sure that your oven is baking or cooking at the temperature that it says it's baking, because sometimes ovens can be a little bit wonky that way. I found, I was saying we just moved just 10 minutes away from our old house, but I'm getting to know my new oven, and it definitely cooks hotter than my old oven. So this pandowdy is going to be ready quicker than it would have been at my old house. So just kind of like get to know your oven, get an oven thermometer, and that will save you some time.
There's the sticky toffee date roll in your cookbook. Is that hard or easy?
That one is one of the more involved recipes in the book, only because it's got like 3 separate steps of things to make. So you're making the sponge cake, you're making the filling, and then you're making this kind of like thick caramel sauce to go on top. So it's involved, but it's not hard. And you can break it up into different, you know, pieces if you wanted to make the frosting the day ahead or something. You could, and then just kind of re-whip it to reconstitute it when you're ready to use it. But it's, again, it's like those, all of the roll cakes, which are designed to not be hard, but if you've never made one before, it may feel a little bit intimidating. But no, I really like that recipe. I would recommend trying it if you're feeling in the mood for sticky toffee pudding and you're feeling like you have time to complete all the steps.
Sounds delicious. I'll turn off myself and we'll get back to your apple pandowdy.
Okay, so this could probably be in for a touch longer before I do this, but for the sake of time, I'm going to take this out. I've got my trusty oven mitts here. So it's not really started to brown yet, but the apples are starting to soften up and release a little bit of juice. And so what I want to do is kind of just press down the puff pastry. And normally I would actually do this when it's gotten a little bit browner in color, and it would kind of like, the puff would kind of depuff a little bit. It hasn't puffed up much yet. But this is where it sort of gets its dowdy name in pandowdy, is from this little press into the juices. But again, I think it's really pretty when it comes out. You sort of get that like patchwork quilty look of the puff pastry. It'll brown really nicely when it's done. But I'm gonna toss this back in. And I think you could probably use another 15-ish minutes until it's done. So if we do have any more questions, I'm happy to chat about them.
You can type your questions into the chat box, or you can put them in the Q&A, and we will read them to Molly because her computer is a little far away for her to see.
Yeah. I can bring it closer now that
No, that's okay. I can tell. Let's just see. You have so many cookies in this cookbook.
I do, yes. I figured you can't really have a sheet pan cookbook without including a good cookie chapter.
So when you did your first book, how did you actually come up with the idea?
Yeah, so when I did my first cookbook, that was almost 10 years ago now, actually, in 2014, I was living in San Francisco, and I was blogging, doing my food blog quite regularly. And kind of through like a lucky series of connections with a job that I had worked in the past at a candy company, I was introduced to this editor at Workman Publishing. And it was actually she who had the original idea and wanted to kind of explore it with an author who was willing to write about it. And I just loved the idea. I thought it was so smart. It was so, it just made so much sense. I had been cooking on sheet pans for years, since culinary school. And the idea of putting a whole meal together on a sheet pan just really appealed to me. I think it appeals to a lot of people. you know, whether you are just really like a busy parent, a busy person, if you want to cook, you know, if maybe it's just you or you and one other person and you want to cook like a big sheet of something to have for the whole week, it just makes sense. And to be able to make, you know, really delicious, elegant meals, just using one pan, not dirtying your whole kitchen, not taking out every, you know, gadget and pan that you have. It just makes so much sense to me. So I really relish the opportunity to develop all the recipes. And that one I actually made all the recipes and I photographed it myself out of my kitchen in San Francisco. So it was a very unique opportunity for me. And I was really, really glad to be able to do it.
Someone's asking, how long in total time does this apple dish cook?
So in the cookbook, it says cook it for 30 minutes, press down, and then cook it for another 30 minutes. Basically, you just want to make sure that the apples have kind of slumped and released a lot of good juice. You'll see sort of this like caramelly sauce almost in there from the creme fraiche. And the puff pastry you want to be crispy and brown.
Let's see. Anyone else have any other questions? I'm just looking through your one pan and done, and I can't believe how many recipes you have in this.
It is. It's a lot of recipes, but it's broken up into chapters that I think just make a lot of sense on a sheet pan. So the first chapter is sheet cakes. These are just single layer cakes, usually with frosting, sometimes with like a glaze or something on top. And what I really like about sheet cakes is, number one, they cook very quickly because of the wide surface area on the sheet pan. And they're just, number two, you can serve them straight from the pan. There's something so nostalgic to me about a sheet cake, especially one just served from the pan with like a thick layer of frosting. And third, I love the frosting to cake ratio of a sheet cake, because you have, you know, a good little bit of cake and then you can really pile on the frosting and get like a thick layer of frosting on there too. So that's the first chapter. And then the second chapter is that layered and rolled cakes chapter. So there's a lot of different rolled cakes. Here's the strawberry and cream roll. And then the layer cakes are really fun because it's the same idea. You just bake on one sheet, and then you can cut your cake into either squares or circles, you know, whatever shape you're going for, and stack them on top of each other for your layered cake. And then I think we move on to bars. Yep, I've got a whole chapter of bars. There's brownies, blondies. These are berry shortbread crumble bars. This is a fun one. This is a patchwork cookie bars recipe. And what this is, it's just one, you make one dough and then you divide it into 3 bowls and you flavor it with 3 different flavorings. So I have one that's like a chocolate chip coconut, another that is oatmeal, dried cranberry, and then the third is a chocolate M&M cookie dough. And you just sort of like patch them together on your sheet pan and bake them all together. So it sort of ends up looking a bit like a patchwork quilt when you're done. And then you can either slice it up by flavor, or you can just slice it so that each slice gets a few different flavors in the bar. And I just think that it's really fun, and you can sort of cater to a lot of different tastes that way. After the bars, there's the cookie section, which is great, especially around the holidays. If you're putting together, I like to put together little boxes as gifts for like teachers and neighbors and stuff. There's a lot of good options in there. And then we move to the fruit forward kind of pie-ish chapter. This is my fresh fruit tart, which also uses puff pastry as the base. And I'll show you here the apple pan dowdy. This is sort of what it looks like when it's baked. And hopefully we'll get to see that here as it finishes up. But again, it's just pretty with that, again, sort of patchworky effect of the puff pastry over the apples. This one I like to serve with like a big serving spoon, scooping up helpings into bowls, and then definitely topping with either some ice cream or maybe just a splash of heavy cream, something like that. And then the last chapter in the book is breakfast and breads, which I love breakfast, I love brunch, and I like having sweet options for that meal. So it has everything from scones, and then you know, I have like this blueberry muffin cake, for example. So instead of scooping out all your individual muffins, you can just make one sheet tray of blueberry muffin cake, slice that into squares, and you're good to go. And a lot of these recipes, I know somebody had asked, can you make ahead of time? And a lot of them, yes, you can. So here's my cinnamon roll poke cake. So instead of, you know, making a yeasted dough, letting it rise, making individual cinnamon rolls, this I just make a sheet cake and then poke holes in it and fill the holes with this kind of gooey cinnamon roll filling with that brown sugar and cinnamon, and then it gets topped with a nice thick cream cheese frosting. This would be a really good one to make the night before, and then you can either just serve it at room temperature, or you can even warm up slices in the microwave for that like true cinnamon roll kind of vibe. And that's one of my favorites. But hopefully there's a little something in here for everybody, and plenty of sweets to share and go around.
Do you want to tell the audience something about your blog?
Sure. Yeah, my blog is called Dunk and Crumble, and I started it, like I said, all those years ago when I was working my corporate job and very unhappy and just wanting some sort of creative outlet. So I've always loved writing. It was sort of like in that birth of blogs internet area I think it was back in 2009. And I don't blog as much anymore, just occasionally here and there, just since having kids. I have found it difficult to stay on top of it all. But you can find, it's still full of all kinds of recipes, everything from savory to sweet, and little essays that I kind of write along with it. But it's still, I really like having it, you know, I have the option to keep it or not keep it, and what should I do with it, but I like keeping it just as almost like a journal of what my life has been like these past 10 plus years and what I've been eating and cooking, and I can go back and reference recipes that I have made in the past. But it's fun, you can search for different recipes on there, and I've got this time of year, there's like a lot of pumpkin stuff happening, and I have some fun recipes to look up on there. There's a pumpkin mousse that I'm thinking about making again soon. But yeah, that's all on the blog.
Do you have any interest in ever becoming a restaurateur?
I don't think so. That is a really difficult job, and I don't think would play necessarily to my strengths. I'm happiest when I'm sort of just in the kitchen, experimenting with things, kind of in my own head, writing notes, and then writing about recipes. And I don't think that being a restaurateur would necessarily align with those interests.
When you're serving this pandowdy, will you just be serving it out of the pan, or you'll flip it out?
I'll be serving it straight out of the pan.
It's a great substitute for apple pie for Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking about making it for Thanksgiving, actually. And I'm also going to be making my, let's see, pumpkin pie bars. Let's see if I can find the picture. So the pumpkin pie bars, this one, just for the photo, is cut into a triangle, but I usually cut them into rectangles. And it's really nice. It's got this graham cracker pecan press-in crust, and then just like a typical pumpkin pie custard filling on top. It's really nice because, again, it's a whole sheet pan of pumpkin pie, and I'm normally stuck making like at least 4 pies at Thanksgiving, but this time I'll probably make 1 sheet tray, maybe 2, and call it a day.
It's brilliant.
It's still not quite ready. It's starting to brown a little bit, but not quite. not quite there. It's getting close though. It's smelling really, really good. It smells like I'm baking an apple pie.
Do you ever get the children involved in baking?
I do. My kids, they also have big sweet teeth. No surprise there. But they do like getting involved, and especially when they were younger. As they get older, they have different interests, and they're a little bit busier with activities, but they still enjoy coming into the kitchen to help me bake. I find it's a fun bonding activity for me with them. And there's not a whole lot that they can't do, I would say, in the kitchen, especially with a little bit of supervision, but they love to do the hand mixer, for example. They also love to do the stand mixer when I let them do that. But even if it's just, getting a big bowl and some whisks and spatulas and having them help me whisk and fold and add, and all that is stuff that they really enjoy doing. And I also find that when they are involved in the cooking or the baking, they're more likely to try something. So, they've had phases, ups and downs of pickiness in the kitchen and what they will and won't try. But I find that when they are involved to help me, that's when I have usually a little bit more success in at least getting them to try something new.
That sounds great. Do you do cooking lessons or cooking classes?
I don't anymore. I used to do in San Francisco and in New York kids cooking classes,
Fun.
which is really, really fun. Yeah, and I would definitely consider doing more of that here in Seattle. But again, since having kids, I sort of haven't been as on top of my own career stuff as I may otherwise have been. But that's something that I really enjoy doing. I enjoy the sort of sharing the learning and chatting with people, and especially with kids, it's just really fun.
Maybe you want to tell people about how much easier it is to make focaccia than bread.
Yeah, that's one of the bread recipes in here. I've got a focaccia recipe. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is, a simple focaccia. And I just love this recipe because it's quite simple to make. And I know that sometimes working with yeast can be intimidating to people, but I use instant yeast in this recipe, which I find pretty easy to work with. And it's so fun. Something about focaccia, you get this big sheet pan, you oil it really well with olive oil, and then you kind of just press and stretch your dough out onto the pan. You let it rest for a while, and then you take your oiled fingers and you make those kind of classic dimples in focaccia. And I have some different options for flavoring your focaccia. You could keep it totally plain. You could add something like this, like tomatoes and thyme and a little lemon zest, or you could, put in your favorite spice. Like I like za'atar seasoning a lot. But you could really kind of play up the flavors here and make it really fun. This is in the breakfast and breads chapter, although it's one of only 2 bread recipes. The other one is my orange and olive oil challah loaf.
Now that does not look easy.
It doesn't, but it's not hard. So normally a challah is kind of a complicated, like folding, braiding, 8-strand situation. This one I just braid with 3 strands of dough, just like you were braiding your hair. And then you just tuck it around itself to make this shape. So it looks really complicated, but in reality, it's not at all. And there's a lot of inactive time here. Like you make the dough and then you just like let it rest for a bit. You could make it the day before, make the dough the night before and then come back to it later. It's pretty forgiving challah recipe.
It's a beautiful picture. Did you do the photographs in this book?
I didn't. No, I wised up for this book and also my last book, One Pan and Done. And I hired professional photographers for both. And I'm very, very pleased with how it came out. I don't think I could have done as good a job by a mile. Yeah, the photos in this book are just really lovely.
Yeah, the photos are great. I always think they're so helpful.
Yeah,
So what do you think's happening in the oven?
let's take a look. These are so funny. They were a gift at first, and I thought they were like almost a joke because they make me look like Mickey Mouse, but they work really, really well. Ooh, my glasses are fogging up. It's a good sign. All right. Okay.
Oh,
So we've made some very good progress, as you can see. It's really starting to get juicy. There's like caramelly sauce. Let me see if I can get a spoon and show you. It's starting to kind of bubble and get juicy and caramelly, which is exactly what we want. And the puff pastry is getting nice and brown. You could call this done if you wanted to, because it's brown enough. I would probably keep this in the oven for another 5 to 10 and just let the puff pastry get even browner and let the apples go for a little bit longer. But you could certainly call this a day and then just scoop out big portions. I would use something like this. Scoop out a big portion and immediately put a little bit of vanilla ice cream on top. And I think that would be really, really nice. Good breakfast here in Seattle as the sun is rising.
well, we've come to the end of the hour, and I can't believe you did this all in 1 hour. It's so beautiful and such a tasty recipe. Let me show everybody the cover again. As I said, Barrett Bookstore has both One Pan and Done and sheet pan sweets on their shelves, and the library has some as well. And we can't thank you enough, Molly. Thanks for getting up so early, and now the day has begun. We really see that Seattle's about to wake up.
It really is. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun.
And the children were perfect.
They were, not a peep.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. And as I said, we have a few copies at the library, so stop by or head over to Barrett's, and you can all enjoy these recipes for the holidays. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank
See you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.